I am Diane Anderson from Boise, Idaho, and my experience with the legal system is defined as drunk on power, and it's a deadly comedy of errors. And the prelude to the father knows best no matter what tradition in Idaho, where children and women must obey the boss at all costs, where children and wives have no recourse to escape abuse, began for me in 2000. We had a house fire. I had little to no support to deal with all the turmoil of that nightmare, which the fire was very little, and the claim was enormous. We were suicidal. I was suicidal. My children were suicidal. My husband was homicidal before we got to the end of that claim. No help from the Industrial Commission. It was a nightmare that somehow we survived with the grace of God. After a couple of years, we sued the insurance company, and the attorney, who's a hotshot attorney here in town, Chuck Peterson, worked with an attorney that my husband found, Steve Herndon, and they were going to take it. This was a David and Goliath claim, and they were going to take it all the way to the bank, okay? Judge Reardon, I can't think of his first name, he was an attorney on the case. We had a really strong case. It was really bad. I was suicidal. It was just so unrelenting. The unrelenting stress and the exhaustion lasted for years. We sued, and they said, trust me. Everyone said, trust me. Trust me, we'll take care of this. Dealing with that case was like confronting a rapist without support. I mean, it was very traumatic. We got to the end of that case, ready to go to trial, walking up the steps almost, and they wouldn't take it to trial. They settled, and I was left with no help, with no recourse, nothing. I was just, sorry, we're not going to do anything. They settled. We ended up with a $135,000 loss on the house. My children were traumatized. I was betrayed by those people who told me to trust them. Shortly before that ended, one of the attorneys, Reardon, was appointed to be a judge. And a few months later, my husband was, during that time and subsequently, out of state working a lot, and I was the stay-at-home single mother to 9, although I was married. And it was really hard. My husband was emotionally shut down, and the stress and the exhaustion from having to deal with all of those things took a toll on me, and I checked myself into St. Al's for recuperation. I was having heart palpitations and all kinds of horrible symptoms. Nobody could understand what they were. Nobody knew what they were. They chalked it up to mental illness and tried to get me to take drugs. Okay, so I survived that somehow during pregnancies and stuff. Nobody understood what was going on. Doctors told me when I questioned their diagnoses, they said, well, if you're not going to follow my advice, then I'm not going to be your doctor, and nobody in this clinic will be your doctor. Really? Sorry. So I found another doctor, and that was, it was humiliating. There was a lot of psychological abuse and intimidation, and that's the traditional method here for maintaining control. And the churches here teach that questioning authority is sacrilege, and obedience is required. The trouble is that most of the faithful church members are also civic leaders with the power to enforce, by force, their ways on those around them. My husband treated me more and more like a slave. He'd berate me and then want to have sex with me. And I just couldn't take it. I just wouldn't take it anymore. I one day asked him, why don't you just kill me and get it over with? And he said, because I won't go to jail for you. And so it was determined that accidentally discovered that I had thyroid cancer. And my doctor finally called me and said, I talked to your husband and asked him if he wanted to be with you when I gave you this diagnosis. And he said, no, she's a big girl. So he didn't offer me any support. But she gave me the diagnosis, and yes, it was thyroid cancer. And I thought, that's a sorry state of affairs when a cancer diagnosis brings you peace of mind. But it explained all of the symptoms, all of the mental illness. You know, we don't know what's wrong with you. It must be mental illness. Well, I subsequently learned that in legal circles, if you can't argue the facts, claim mental illness. So that was, he gave me, when it was discovered that I had thyroid cancer, he gave me permission to die. And I thought, you don't have the authority to give me permission to die. Isn't that up to God? And I declined. And that was not okay. So I resisted. He assaulted me. I resisted the sexual assault, and the next day, sheriffs came and arrested me for domestic battery. So, and I was exiled from home. A no contact order was placed, and I had nowhere to go to deal with my cancer. I laid on the bunk of the Ada County Jail, thinking, trying not to read the graffiti above me, and thinking, this is the bowels of hell. Hell can't be worse than this. And other inmates would say, what are you in for? And I told them, you know, what I'd been arrested for. And she said, man, if you're going to do the time, you should have done the crime. And I said, no. The thought came to me, there's a scripture that says, be wise as serpents and yet without sin. So I embarked on a journey of becoming wise as the serpents that were around me and not being guilty of what they were accusing me of. So my husband had all the support from church leaders, legal circles. His father was an attorney, and a country club 19th hole person, which is very exclusive and men only, and we can do anything we want because we make the rules kind of person. So I had no support. He had all support. I faced trial for that domestic battery charge and was found not guilty, a minor miracle at the time in 2005. The judge was a little bit sympathetic to me because he also was a survivor of thyroid cancer. And so he knew all of the weird things that can do to you. If the brain is the head of a corporation, the thyroid is the receptionist controlling everything. And so all of the weird symptoms he could relate to. I was found not guilty in that trial, and my husband had said, well, if you just stop defying me, all of these things would come to an end. They were going to teach me a lesson. And when I was found not guilty, he thought that the legal system thought that was too dangerous a precedent to set for them to not win. So they brought charge after charge against me let's see, the charges were manufactured charges, a lot in part allegations by prosecutors making stuff up to get me out of the picture, keep me quiet. I know contact order was placed. I was exiled from home, from church, from all my support, and by the grace of God, I was able to get out of there and get some help. There was when they arrested me, they wouldn't let me take my purse or anything to the jail, and they except my driver's license and my coat, because it was in late February. So when I was finally bailed out of there, my mother put her house up for bail, and the bails I thought were extraordinarily high then, and they're way extraordinarily high now. And I realized through this series of years of case after case I suffered through about 15 cases in less than 4 years, all pretty much at the same time, trying to prove that I was either criminal or insane. And my husband wanted the children and the property, all of the assets. He wanted to be able to get all those, and to take custody from me, I had to be determined unfit. So all of these charges were brought to make me an unfit mother. Well, I was the 24/7 single mother while he was out making all this money. He had no idea how to parent. So I was in court, sitting around, waiting for hearings, and I subsequently learned that the courts were private corporations. I saw Dun & Bradstreet reports on the 4th Judicial Court of Idaho. Ownership status, private. Chief Executive, Larry Reiner, the court administrator. Really? Okay, and so they're running a private business. And I said, this is a criminal-making machine. Well, I didn't know at the time that was the facts, but I could just see they were just churning out. They're just bringing people through the system and charging them with stupid crimes like, dog at large was my introduction to the criminal justice system. I went into the school where my son had I think it's a 504 plan for his diabetes, a federal protection plan in place. They had lost it, and I had survived the fire and the court civil case that we were just dumped on. And I went into the school, and they had blamed him for having an emergency and passed all the responsibility on to him. And I said, this is crap. And I was mad, and I hit my hand on the table, and I said, you need to have an emergency plan in place and find a solution. One of the principals sticks his head in and tells me to be quiet, and I told him I won't say what I told him. It's not G-rated. But I said, knock it off. Leave me alone. So, and get out of here. So they called the police. I got in my car to leave, and they called the police and said that I had assaulted a teacher. Then they changed the charge to reckless driving because as I was backing out of the parking lot, it was when school was starting, all the students were being dropped off, and someone had pulled up behind my car, and I stopped backing up so I wouldn't hit them. Well, and they exaggerated the claim and said that I was almost had a collision in the parking lot. And when I got out of there and left leaving the driveway, there was a car right there, and I had to go around it, and my tire went up on the driveway, on the sidewalk, and then back down. And the charge said that it was reckless driving. I was driving on the sidewalk. Right, okay. So I didn't know this at the time, but I was driving home, and police stopped me right out here in front of Cole and Overland, right where we are right now. And they pull me out, and I opened the car door, and they slammed it shut and said, "Stay inside there." And I'm going, "What?" I said, "Why don't you just shoot me and get it over with?" They said, "Oh, she's suicidal," and they took me and put me on a 24-hour mental hold. Okay. I'm going, please, no. But that trial, the ACLU wouldn't take it to trial. They wouldn't do anything because I couldn't get anyone to address it within the 6-month time frame where you have to make a claim, or they won't do anything. That was just the beginning. And then this was before I was diagnosed with cancer. Then I was diagnosed with cancer, given permission to die, arrested for resisting my abusive husband, and then they used the fact that I had suffered through this house fire and all of the thyroid dysfunction as proof that I was mentally ill. Okay, that doesn't prove that I'm mentally ill, but they wanted me to take psychotropic drugs. My husband is a pharmacist, so he knows all about all of that. He should have known about the thyroid things, and he might have. But then I went, I went charge after charge in the family court, abuses, judgments against me. When I had 2 attorneys, both of them quit because they didn't want to rile the judge. They didn't want to file motions in my behalf. I said, "This is my life. This is my family at stake. You help me or else get out of here." So the first divorce attorney charged me $15,000 to quit. Really? Okay, whatever. Get out of my way. So after the second one quit, because she was afraid of the judge, I did it myself. God helped me, and I filed motions. I filed all kinds of things. There was a no-contact order in place. My children, before that first trial, knew that I had cancer, and then a no-contact order is in place, and I disappeared, and they didn't have any idea if I was alive or dead or what. So finally, I was able to get that resolved, and then after that case, I was found not guilty, and all these additional charges were brought. They had to be right somehow, and my children suffered immensely. I went to pick up my kids one day while this divorce was pending. My husband had been out of town a lot, leaving the children unattended, so I was able to get a temporary custody order saying that if he was not going to be there after 10 p.m., then I could come and pick up the kids. Well, when they wrote the order and it said after 10 a.m. Originally, that was the one that we had agreed to, but then the judge changed it to 10 p.m. So actually, someone besides the judge changed it. The other divorce attorney changed it. Okay, so I went there, and they brought charges against me, against my son, for injury to child, because I was there. My husband said, "You need to leave," and I'm going, "I'm trying to. I got in the car, and I was trying to, roll back out of the car, out of the driveway. My 6-year-old son had climbed in the car and didn't want to get out. He wanted to come with me. And my husband said to him, "Do you want to be responsible for your mother going to jail?" And I thought, I won't say what I said. But I thought that was just cruel and common. My husband had been in a lot of pain, and he had had his knees replaced, and he was a mess, and he was on a cocktail of medications that would have killed a horse. And he had told me that that was the worst day of his life. He was like homicidal. And he wanted me to go away. And I called the police and told them, he's got guns in the house, the kids are in there, he's homicidal, he's on this cocktail of drugs, and they came and they said, because I had been arrested the first time, well, you're the one that's the criminal here, so you're the one that's going to be arrested. I said, you don't care about my children are in there, and he's got guns, and he's homicidal. They were more concerned about his Second Amendment rights than they were about the safety of my children. Okay, the gray hair is growing in my head as I'm experiencing all of this. Okay, case after case was brought. When my children would show any sign of loyalty to me, additional charges would be brought. False charges, lots of them. And I just had to keep finding a way to do the right thing and live so that they couldn't prove that I had done anything wrong. I insisted on my constitutional rights. The attorneys, public defenders, I said on this case at the school, I said, they changed finally the charge to unsafe backing. I said, is there a statute that says that? He said, no, it's legal fiction. I said, you're convicting me on legal fiction? And the judge in that case, it was a plea agreement, was Judge Reardon. And I'm going, okay, an Alfred plea this was a dog at large charge, an Alfred plea. And he said, oh, well, it's a conflict of interest, but I'll take the, plea agreement anyway. And then I realized in the name of getting it over with, I took that plea agreement. And immediately after that, I thought, you'll never be free of this. Because once you get your neck in that legal system noose, you can never get out. So all these subsequent charges were then brought and brought and brought. And I lost my family. I lost everything. The no contact order was placed to keep me from telling my side of the story. And the psychological abuse and the psychological damage to my children, that everything that had ever gone wrong in our family was instigated by me. It was the gotcha, the first punch person doesn't get in trouble. It's the one who returns the punch. That's what was happening to me. I tried to get help from attorneys, and most of them told me that they had to work in this town and they couldn't help me. I was targeted from a long time, for a long time, and I thought, I'm a nobody. Why is this happening to me? But I overcame my fear of them, and so then I was no longer controllable. And once you're not controllable, you have to be quieted somehow, right? I mean, that's kind of a common thread. To get this conviction, in one case they claimed I needed an 18-11 psychological evaluation because I had been alleged to be mentally ill in the family court. So I said, well, you can't have it both ways. If I'm mentally ill for family court, I'm mentally ill for the criminal court. And if I'm not mentally ill for the criminal court, then you're going to have to come up with some other way to deny me my custody of my family. Well, I was found not guilty. I was found competent to stand trial, but they still tried. They had a psychological evaluator come in, and my husband had to pay for that initially, and then to get the proper results, he had to pay another $3,100. So the psychologist in the divorce trial and I conducted my defense, which the judge, Russell Comstock, told me all of my defending myself was inappropriate in his court. I said, too bad. This is my life. And he bustled up on the bench and told me it was inappropriate, and if I didn't stop, talking and responding, I was going straight to jail. Are we clear? He bustles, and I'm going, yeah, for the moment, we're clear. But the no contact order was placed. I had to stay away from my children for years. I mean, it was like no contact order after no contact order was placed as each subsequent charge was placed. And so I couldn't be there with them, for them. There was these additional charges were brought, and only 2 of the children were affected by them because they were the only 2 that had been involved in the truck backing out thing, But so I could contact the rest of the family, and the rest of them, the prosecutors thought that I was defying all of their rules. If I call the house, I should be able to talk to whoever answers the phone, and if it's a protected person, all I can do is ask to talk to someone else. I'm not in violation. But the no contact order was just against me, and my husband, who was on it, was not subject to it. So he could come up to me at my workplace or wherever I was, and I couldn't leave there, and I would be the one that was in violation. I'm going, that is not within my power to control. I can't be liable for that. So they tried to get me convicted of something, anything. Finally, the prosecutor, who I had gone to church with years before, they didn't want me at church anymore. And there was a no contact order in place. My children were in a program, and their father was out of state. No one was caring for them. These are like 6 and 9-year-old children. No one was there for them. And so without violating the no contact order, I went to support them. The prosecutor saw that I was in the building. She called the police. She reported that I was in violation of this no contact order, and they called me out of class to go down to the bishop's office and arrested me. This is not your church, the officer said. You should not have been here today. And I'm thinking, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but isn't the First Amendment at risk here? You don't get to pick, as an officer of the state, where I go to church. They never did address the constitutional question. But that was a bargaining chip in these other cases. If you'll plead guilty to one of these other counts, any one of these other counts, pick a card, any card, then we'll drop this case against you for being in church. I said, if it's a crime to be in church, I hope you have enough evidence to convict me. Okay, so I made him go to trial on that. I was found not guilty by the jury of not violating a no contact order. Well, additional, the lesser included charge of trespassing. Okay, they were going to charge me with that. I said, no. It says right on the building, visitors welcome. I don't have to be a member of this church to be able to come here. There's public notice right there. Oh, crap. Didn't get me there. So they agreed. In the criminal case, they separated out all these charges and made it single trials out of all of them. And there was a lot of pressure for plea agreements, and the attorney said, okay, the prosecutor has said that if you'll agree to take court-ordered medication and plead guilty to one of these misdemeanor counts of injury to child, which it used to be a felony, and Judge Bale said, there's not enough evidence here to justify a felony charge. So they made it a misdemeanor, and they said, if you will plead guilty to this, we'll drop the no contact order and let you get back to taking care of your children, because my husband had left them out of, he was out of state and left them alone. And I said, okay, wait a minute. I'm working for the school district as a substitute teacher. I plead guilty to injury to child. Forget it. I'm in nursing at BSU program there, which I lost my place in there because pending crimes are considered crime in Idaho. So I lost my position in there. I thought there's no future in healthcare. I wanted to be a diabetes educator because my son was diabetic in school. That was what that incident was about. And I said, so let me get this straight. You're telling me that if I agree to take drugs and admit that I injured my child, you'll drop the no contact order and let me take care of them? And if I won't agree that I injured them and won't take drugs, I can't? Yeah, that doesn't sound very good, does it? No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound very good at all. And besides, this is coercion. I said, if the judge asks if you're accepting this plea agreement voluntarily, I would have to say, absolutely not. One of the cases that I was convicted in, the ham sandwich case, I said a croissant ham sandwich right there on the table and said, you know, it doesn't take facts, it doesn't take evidence to convict someone in this court, obviously. And so at my sentencing, you have the right of allocution, right? You get to make a statement to the judge. And I said, you know, these prosecutors accuse, and you don't hold them to any rules of evidence. They're the authorities. They must be right. Well, I said, this is the Constitution. Your job is to uphold the Constitution. That's your job. Idaho can do better than this. Well, his jaw was on the bench, but he did not censure me. He did not do anything except just go, yes, ma'am. I mean, and I appealed my conviction, and I eventually won, which was another minor miracle. I was working at my job at Costco, and other public defenders that knew about my case, one of them came in and high-fived me, and I said, what's going on? And he said, you won your appeal. And I said, oh, cool. That's cool, isn't it? And he's going, it never happens. I said, it happens. God delivered me again. The first day that I walked into that courthouse, I was overwhelmed with the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. And another scripture came to my mind. Fear not what man can do. I am with thee to deliver thee. And all of these cases have come and gone, and I was found not guilty on all of them because except for the one, there was a couple that, were not ever overturned. That one with the injury to child charge, that they convicted me with no evidence to support it. I appealed that, and my public defender, Eric O'Daniel, who took the appeal, the other attorney, Rick Bergeson, who did the case, presented no defense. They got to the part where the prosecution rested. They had not proven their charges, and he made a motion for them under Rule 29 to dismiss the case because they had not done, proven it. And the judge says, well, why don't we just let the jury hear this? Okay. He said, okay, so present your defense. And he says, we have no defense. I'm going, you told me to trust you, you lying sack. I got more consideration from the prosecutors than I did from my defense attorney. But he came out, after the first hearing, he came out from behind in chambers, and he had the look of terror on his face, and I knew that whatever he had been told back there was that I was to be silenced at all costs. He was subsequently, after the fact, brought up on charges because he challenged Judge Copsey on a conflict of interest on a case, and she had bogus charges brought against him and sent him to prison. He was, he was a lawyer. He was a snake too. He was playing by their rules, and they turned and devoured him. Eric O'Daniel, who was awful at representing me, he did know the Constitution. He had been a law clerk, and he did know the Constitution pretty well. And I said, this is stage 4 cancer that this system is in. And he said, he agreed. But he said, it's not my job to fix the system. I said, well, it's your job to defend my constitutional rights. I'll work on fixing the system. So he was subsequently brought up on charges too. Turned on by the people that he was being loyal to as a sacrificial scapegoat. Both of them were, for challenging the judges. Judge Gardunia, she had me arrested just for showing up in her court. She told me, the prosecutor who had the bishop there, they called another case of violating a no contact order, and she berated me up and down on false allegations, false statements by everyone, by the prosecutor. He said that ecclesiastical leaders don't want her there. And I thought, oh, okay, justify that one, guys. You don't get to pick that. There's scriptures that say, don't cast them out of your public meetings, people. Said, so, she said, so if you show up in my court again on a violation of this no contact order, you will go straight to jail. That marshal will take you straight to jail. So I was there in a court for rescheduling. It was a traffic violation case that was also bogus, and I had the evidence to prove that it was not the hit and run that they claimed it was. I had the insurance claim. It was too minor to even report, but I had all of that information. And my attorney, Eric O'Daniel, he said, well, okay, I had all the evidence. He said, well, just plead guilty to something. There will be no court costs, all of this negotiating stuff. And I said, why, if I have the evidence to prove that I'm not guilty, would I plead guilty just so you can have, you're not even getting court costs out of this. He was afraid to lose. He was afraid for them to lose because of the financial motive of all of these judges. They only get paid money into their retirement funds with convictions. So it's a conflict of interest for all of them to sit on any of those cases because they are biased to find convictions. I brought that to the attention of an attorney when I was waiting in a case that my son was involved in. Also bogus, a traffic citation. And I revealed to him, I said, do you know about the Dun & Bradstreet report that the courts here are private? And that all of the retirement funds are funded by conviction fines? And he said, that would be a conflict of interest. You could end up dead for making that known. And Gabby Giffords had just been shot in the head like 3 weeks before. And I said, oh no, if God wants you to live, there's nothing you guys can do about it. I'm not afraid of you. And the prosecutor, they all just shut right up. They were just like, whoa, yikes, what are we going to do now? She's not intimidatable. I had been on the verge of death. I've been on the verge of death a lot. And I thought, and I've had my near-death experience, and I've seen death is not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. And I had to come back. It was awful having to come back to prolong the torture of living in this society here, Boise. It was awful. But I thought, when I get permission from God to go, I will go, and I'll be happy for it. And until then, I'm going to work on rooting out the cancer that has taken over the lives of so many people. So after my cases were all over, and the appeal that Eric O'Daniel was supposed to do, I made it through the, it was supposed to go to the Supreme Court, and he wouldn't file a brief, because if it was overturned, then the divorce justification for taking all the property and the custody and the house and everything and giving it all to my husband would be invalid. The judge in that divorce, when we were having that case, and I was on the stand testifying myself, he said, well, I understood that, you know, parents had a constitutional right to associate with their children. Someone had established that previously. And he said that he was contemplating limiting my custody privileges. And I said, I'm accountable to God for my dealings with my children, not you. There's not a court in this land who has the authority to sever that relationship. That's up to God and God alone. Well, he was going to show me. So he took custody away, and he gave all assets to my husband. He gave slave owner rights, pretty much, to me and my children's, and how I could visit them. It was a nightmare. After all of that was over, and a probation officer wanted me to, you know, I had to report and do all this stuff until that was overcome. He said, why don't you just let them have their way? And I said, because they've taken everything from me. They've taken my name, my integrity, my reputation, my family, my home, all my assets. I have nothing left to give my children but a legacy of integrity. And I'm not going to let them just get away with it. So I fought and fought. And when this was all over and I had won so much, then I went in and sat in on cases. And Judge Comstock, having lost everything, he wouldn't convene if I was in the room. He'd wait till I left the room, and then he would convene to do his mischief. In that, when I was testifying in that case, there was allegations that I wasn't following the court orders. And there was a note that my husband had given to my children to give one that was protected by the no contact order, my 6-year-old son, permission to come with me with his sister, who I could take to do something for her birthday. And they came down to the end of the street where I was waiting for her, and I couldn't even stay there in following the no contact order, and I couldn't tell him that I couldn't stay there. And he was so betrayed when I said, I just have to leave. And I told my 9-year-old, I said, you're going to have to get Dad to talk to the prosecutors and get the judge to modify this, because he doesn't have the authority to modify it. And I can't do anything about it. I have to leave. So I told that experience to the judge on the stand, and he told me afterwards, he said, what a terrible thing it was for me to plant in a young child's mind, this is a quote, that some guy in a black robe had more authority than his parent. And I'm thinking, are you saying that I have more authority than you? Or are you saying that only fathers are parents? What are you saying? We had a psychological evaluation. The psychologist diagnosed me from the bench with a mental illness, which is unethical. And I said, so, and I was conducting my own defense, and I said, so are you diagnosing me based on these medical results, these test results that I took? And he had sent me through a HIPAA request my test results. And he said, yeah. I said, well, these test results that you say are my test results, one of them is in my husband, it's his results, and the rest of these are not even in my name. They're a different Diane. These are not even my results. And I impeached the testimony of this psychologist. He was dismissed. But the judge then turns to me and he says, well, it's obvious to me you're mentally ill. And I'm going, and I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, you don't have the authority to practice medicine without a license. Juris Doctor does not count as a medical qualification. Unbelievable the things that were taking place in there. And there's just so many things, just subsequent waterfall and cascade of Keystone Cop abuse in the system. I testified before the legislature. They said, well, there's nothing we can do here. You need to go talk to the legislators. I went to, I learned the lawyer ruse. Don't trust a lawyer. And I didn't have any money. I was poor. My husband, when he had me arrested that first time, transferred all the community assets into private accounts in his name only and left me with nothing, except there was a credit card in my ski coat pocket. And when I got out of jail that next day, I went in and reserved a room at a hotel because I had nowhere else to go. And because there was a pending charge on that card, it couldn't close. So with that card and some divine intervention, I was able to hire an attorney for that first case. He wouldn't deal with any of my subsequent cases. He just was, that's as far as he dared go. But it's just, I tell people of my experiences in the jail. I almost died in the jail several times. I was there 3 times. Once on that first case of domestic battery, once when I was arrested in church. What are you in for? Being in church today. Oh, nobody could believe that, but it was true. It was true. And I had thyroid cancer, right? I'm supposed to be taking medication. No medication for me for days. I had heart palpitations after the 3rd day. And you're pushing the button and the other inmates are going, hey, they're supposed to respond when you're pushing that emergency button. Finally, someone comes on the microphone and says, what's going on down there? I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. Oh, I don't think so. I said, well, if I'm dead in the morning, I'm authorizing you to give my stuff to these other girls. Well, they finally sent someone in at 3 o'clock in the morning and, oh, do you know you have a heart condition? I said, yeah, I think I do know that. Yeah, well, you might want to have that checked when you get out of here. I said, well, I would love to do that. How about we just take care of that right now? No, couldn't do that. If you had a dream in booking, if you have a dream, you're delusional. You're psychotic. What? An emotional breakdown was described. I was engaged or undergoing repeated emotional breakdowns, but I heard the definition of what they were defining as an emotional breakdown, being moved to tears. Those are the kind of charges that are brought, and they were brought against me, but they're brought against hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families and people in the system down there to make them into criminals so they can get some money out of them. It's criminal what the predators are doing that are officers of the court. So I just I would just say that thousands of people, the fate of thousands of people, both in Idaho, which is the catch and release capital of America, and not for fishing, there's no justice here at all. And I've learned that there's no justice pretty much in any state courts, but Idaho and Georgia are the leaders of per capita people in the system. At the time, Georgia was 1 in 13 people were involved in the system, the legal system, and Idaho was right behind it at 1 in 17. That is unsustainable. And they did it for the money. You get a conviction, it doesn't matter what the charge is, make up a charge. If there's not a statute, come up with one. It's legal fiction. We can do that.
Unsafe backing.
Unsafe backing. Right. I was stopped by a policeman, and I unbuckled my seatbelt as he approached the car, and he was going to give me a speeding ticket, and I said, I was going 4 miles over the speed limit. And this is what I thought the speed limit was. He said, well, it was changed. It was like 6 months before. And I said, oh, come on. He said, well, if you're going to roll your eyes at me, then I was going to cut you a deal. But if you're going to roll your eyes at me, I'm going to give you this charge. I said, show me the statute that says I can't roll my eyes at you. Oh, well, I'll just give you the no seatbelt. I'm going, it was buckled when you came up. But it's just, they think that they're doing, it's salesmanship. I'll cut you a deal. You don't have the authority to cut me anything, pal. I have no respect for those people anymore. The ones that are honest are too chicken to defy the powers that be, the robbers in the black robes. So, I don't know. I've told many people as they abused me. When I was in the jail, they had charges, or they were talking about inmates don't have constitutional rights in the Ada County Jail. I said, well, a lot of us in here are accused but not convicted of anything. We have constitutional rights. Well, that's debatable. We all went out to the yard, for some break, and then we come back in, and I mentioned to some inmate about, something about constitutional rights, and the officer that was in charge, who was later made the jail administrator, he called out and he said, all right, who is that talking about constitutional rights? One more word about constitutional rights. And I said, well, we should have constitutional rights. All right, Anderson, up against the wall. I won't have you and your poison in my unit. And I thought, constitutional rights or poison in here, huh? Fine. What's your name? I just want to spell it right for the book I'm writing. Whoa! That shot more people down than anything I could do, was tell them that I was going to write their name in a book.
Next time, tell them they're going to be in a movie.
I have posted that. I came up here kind of without telling anybody, for fear that if they knew I was here, I would disappear somehow, But I guess my work isn't finished yet, because I'm still breathing and God has not given me permission to leave. So here I am, holding them accountable.
Let me ask you a couple questions.
Hit it.
How many children?
9.
I thought you said that.
That was not a mistake.
9 kids taken away from you and given to the pharmacist.
Who is abusing drugs.
Prior to this, had you had experience with the system?
No, I thought the system worked. And then I was thrust into the bowels of hell and realized there's the underbelly of the beast is here.
Okay. Never been arrested? Never charged with a crime prior to this?
My first
you don't
experience.
Have to answer any question that you don't want.
My first experience with the criminal justice system was a conviction for having a dog at large. Serious crime. Put her away for years.
And was that part of all of this?
Oh, that was after the fire and all of that stuff. Then the neighbor, the dog would follow the squirrels over the fence and then jump back. And and I took the hit because my husband had the job and he had the career and he had to be, protected. I saw a lot of people in jail that took the hit for their spouse who was really the one who had violated. A woman who had given birth like 8 days before, she was the one in there so that her husband could keep the job. 8-day-old baby. Who's taking care of that baby? Not her. A lot. There was a lot of people in there who had injuries and no medical help. It was just one thing after another. I thought, this can't really be happening. And every bit of it was true. And I wrote it all down and kept a daily journal. And as people would abuse me, I'd tell them, okay, now I want to spell your name right because I'm writing this book. And they'd shut right down. Ooh, accountability. I'm all about accountability.
All right. Tell me your story in 30 seconds.
That's tough.
You're going to have to work hard at it.
But... A victim of society's father knows best, no matter what he's doing. The boss is always right. I was subjected to a lot of isolation, intimidation, so that these powers that be could maintain control. When I could no longer endure that and fought back, I was punished. My family was punished. All the power of the legal system was brought against me to teach me a lesson, not to defy power. But what they didn't know was that God has more power than they. And He helped me overcome all of the treachery that they brought against me. And I recorded it, I kept a journal of it, and I named names and blew whistles. And I have received a letter now from the Criminal Justice Commission that bars me from coming to their meetings, because I would go in there and I would quietly smile and take notes, and then I would go and report to these other people who were digging up the foundations of all this corruption. So they don't want me in there. They don't want me getting the dirt on this executive board meeting that is all about coming up with more profitable ways for the criminal justice system in Idaho to make money.
Other people allowed to attend?
Other than me, yes. The people that they don't think are out of the teapot. You know, if they're still in the tempest in the teapot, then they're okay, and they don't
have to follow the open meeting laws.
No, they don't have to. They don't have to do anything. And this is made up of all the agency heads, of all of the law enforcement agencies, the state police, everybody, and they have no accountability to anyone. They think.
Do you still have parental rights?
With God, yes. Yes.
Would the court take away your parental rights?
They did take away my parental rights. This has been 7+ years. And I told my children, they have no jurisdiction here. The judge, the divorce judge, said that when each of the kids turned 12, then they could determine who they wanted to live with, thinking that they would choose Dad. But when each of them came to that point and they wanted to live with me, there would be no financial support for them. And no, I have not been able to get a job since all of these charges came down. And, you know, everything, even though it was a lot of non-convictions and dismissals and reversals, I have a criminal history record 4 pages long. In this economy, all things being equal, I'm very qualified to do a lot of things, but with a criminal history that's like pages long, people go, next. Not you, honey. Haven't been able to work, which has kept me from being able to overcome my children's need for support. They're in financial bondage. They're hostages. And most of them are adult now, but they've been well trained in the good old boy system of Idaho. trauma to all of them. And I told the kids, and I told the judges and the court officials, I said, you will stand accountable before God one day. The eternal judge will convene, and I'll be there at your arraignment. If you don't fix this, I'm giving you an opportunity to fix it while you still can. Because when you go before that judgment bar, there is no plea deal, there is no appeals, there's nothing. You're it, and there's nowhere to go. And you earned whatever you get. So if you want to have any chance of that, fix what you're doing now. Repair the damage that you're doing to thousands and thousands of families in Idaho. Tearing families apart, you will stand accountable to God for that. And no money on earth is worth that consequence. Well, they haven't taken me very seriously.
Well, they should. May I ask your religion?
I am LDS. I'm a member of the official name is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The whole family?
The whole family.
Judge?
The judge, several of the judges, I don't know. One of them was Catholic. I don't know the religion of a lot of them. But the attorneys and the prosecutors were all LDS. The cops were.
Just trying to see if there was some prejudice, but that doesn't appear to be.
No.
There was one just sweetheart of a man in Des Moines, Iowa, who told the story. His children are now 33 and 30. He has no relationship with them since they were 5 and 3. And he's telling the story. And when I asked, something came up, and he said he was a Christian. And so I said, what type of Christian? He said, you're telling the story, and I can't remember the most important part. Speaks in tongues?
Pentecostals.
Pentecostal.
Mm.
He said he's Pentecostal, so I kind of made note of it. Then when he told me that the judge had entered an order back when the kids were, preteen, denying him the right to ever pray with his children, and then some other things come up later on when he finally got some court records or whatever that had some stuff in there about religion, I turned to him and I said, Don, haven't you ever figured out why it is that they have done this to you? And he said, it's a corrupt system. I said, no, it's because you're Pentecostal. This was totally religion. They took his kids away because of religion. They didn't take them just away from him. They took them away from the wife, too. They put them in foster care and then adopted them out.
Yeah.
It was Pentecostal.
And I was at a Criminal Justice Commission meeting, and the juvenile judge, Varon, was there. And they were talking about the person from the IDOC was saying that to help these single mothers who couldn't afford, they had minimum wage jobs, they took their parental rights away because they couldn't afford to pay for themselves and a child. I said, you don't have the authority to do that just for economic reasons. You know how much damage that does to the children? And they end up in the juvenile system anyway, and it costs more that way. Well, they don't consider that. It's a commodity.
I call it the unauthorized practice of God.
Yes, and the position is already filled.
That's right. That's a wrap.
Thank you.